استووا واعتدلوا. الله أكبر. الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. والسماء بنيناها بأيد وإنا لموسعون والأرض فرشناها فنعم الماهدون ومن كل شيء خلقنا زوجين لعلكم تذكرون ففروا إلى الله إني لكم منه نذير مبين ولا تجعلوا مع الله إلها آخر إني لكم منه نذير مبين كذلك ما أتى الذين من قبلهم من رسول إلا قالوا ساحر أو مجنون أتواصوا به بل هم قوم طاغون فتول عنهم فما أنت بملوم وذكر فإن الذكرى تنفع المؤمنين وما خلقت الجن والإنس إلا ليعبدون ما أريد منهم من رزق وما أريد أن يطعمون إن الله هو الرزاق ذو القوة المتين فإن للذين ظلموا ذنوبا مثل ذنوب أصحابهم فلا يستعجلون فويل للذين كفروا من يومهم الذي يوعدون. الله أكبر. سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. قل هو الله أحد الله الصمد لم يلد ولم يولد ولم يكن له كفوا أحد. الله أكبر. سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله. الله الله سمع الله الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر الله سمع الله لمن حمده الله أكبر الله 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 السلام عليكم ورحمة الله السلام عليكم ورحمة الله اللهم أنت السلام ومنك السلام إليك يرجع السلام تباركت يا ذا الجلال والإكرام لا إله إلا الله تفضل شوف عليك اللهم اصلح لك يا لله واجعل الموت رحمة وصل الله Okay, hello, can you hear me? We're going to start
I can hear
now.
you.
Okay, thank you. Assalamu alaikum, peace be with you, and welcome to another Halaqah, Friday night Halaqah from live from Sayyida Khadija Center. I'm very pleased and glad to have a guest with me. I'll introduce her in a few minutes, and let us start with some verses. We just actually prayed live because it happens that now the Isha prayer, night prayer, is at 8 p.m. and so we have to do something with the timing, but we didn't want to change because the time is going to change, I think, on March 14th. So there is no need to do the adjustment beforehand. So inshallah, we welcome you and thank you for joining us last week for our Black History Month. And it was the last event of Black History Month with Dr. Quick. It was a very, very wonderful program we had on February the 26th. Alhamdulillah, inshallah, after reciting the verses, I'll introduce our guest, and inshallah, you will definitely enjoy tonight's program. It's special with special guests, but also as you saw the what we call the thumbnail or the flyer, we are talking anything that has to do with women, women in religion, women and life, contribution of women, and of course, there's no better guest than having a woman with me here sharing the platform. Inshallah, as we start, I would like to recite from chapter Women, chapter number 4 from the Holy Quran. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم يا أيها الناس اتقوا ربكم الذي خلقكم من نفس واحدة وخلق منها زوجها وبث منهما رجالا كثيرا ونساء واتقوا الله الذي تساءلون به والأرحام إن الله كان عليكم رقيبا وآتوا اليتامى أموالهم ولا تتبدلوا الخبيث بالطيب ولا تأكلوا أموالهم إلى أموالكم إنه كان حوبا كبيرا وإن خفتم ألا تقسطوا في اليتامى فانكحوا ما طاب لكم من النساء مثنى وثلاث ورباع فإن خفتم ألا تعدلوا فواحدة أو ما ملكت أيمانكم ذلك أدنى ألا تعونوا وآتوا النساء صدقاتهن نحلة فإن طبن لكم عن شيء منه نفسا فكلوه هنيئا مريئا صدق الله العظيم وصدق رسوله الكريم. My brothers and sisters, as I said, I have a special guest tonight, and I've spoken in the past about, and of course we have to speak about our mothers and sisters and wives and daughters, but women remain, unfortunately, even in the most so-called advanced civilized countries, still a visible minority. and from wages rights to employment rights to benefits to different, aspects of inclusion. Women are still struggling in spite of all of this. In Islam, we like to emphasize on what is taught, but unfortunately, sometimes the reality of the Muslims themselves doesn't reflect the teachings. Hence, a lot of people blame Islam as being a problem for women. Too much restrictions, you can't do this, you can't do that, you can't just, you have to wear certain, be in certain decorum and wear certain clothing. It sounds like too restrictive, definitely not liberating for women. That's how it's perceived by the world. This discussion, of course, we had it in the past. We've shown that Islam actually came to liberate women. Islam considers men and women equal in the eyes of Allah in terms of their spirituality and their rights, but not in terms of duties, because every person is different, not only male to female, but amongst the males and amongst the females. God will not demand from everyone the same thing. That's all dependent on their abilities and all of these considerations. Now, of course, today I would like to discuss different issues about Muslim women by someone who has walked the talk, not only talked the talk, but also walked the walk, and an activist, a professor, a respected leader. I have done interfaith work with her. We still work on different projects, inshallah, for our communities and for Canada, and also for many, goals, inshallah, because we are brothers and sisters in humanity. Sometimes we are even different in faith, but the same goals. At the end of the day, we all believe in one God. Allah, Elohim, is the same God. The God of Jesus is the God of Muhammad, is the God of Abraham. He's the same God. Allah in Arabic for Muslims and Christians. Allah in the language of Jesus is Allah. Elohim in Hebrew, the language of Moses, and of course Jehovah in English. Yahweh is the same God. We serve the same God. We worship the same God, but of course different expressions. We disagree on some tenets, but at the end of the day, we all acknowledge that Allah, God Almighty, there is only Him, the Creator. With me is Professor Dr. Laura Morlock, as you saw in the flyer or the thumbnail, and she is a professor at Ryerson University. What I do usually, rather than me going over the person's, biography, it's better that I let the person talk. Laura, welcome. I don't want to say to the show, but to our humble, halaqah. Halaqah means a circle, study circle. And because of COVID, people from the comfort of their homes, they're joining us. Welcome, Laura, Dr. Laura.
Assalamu alaikum. Thank you so much for inviting me. I'm really happy to be here.
From the comfort of their homes, they're joining us. Welcome, Laura, Dr. Laura.
Assalamu alaikum. Thank you so much for inviting me. I'm really happy to be here.
Very nice. Thank you. Thank you for being here. And, I know it's amazing with COVID-19.
Assalamu alaikum. Thank you so much for inviting me. I'm really
Sorry,
happy to be
I think,
here.
yeah. Oh, okay.
Very nice. Thank you. Thank you for being here.
Okay,
And,
I'm just gonna turn off some.
it's
Oh Lord, what happened is I need to mute some of this. I have others because I answer questions of the people. So I have YouTube open, Facebook, but there is a delay and it comes after. Let me just mute those. Can you hear me, Laura?
Yes, I can hear you fine. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, this is the live one because there is a delay with Facebook and YouTube, and then it repeats itself. Okay, let me just.
Absolutely.
Sure,
After a year of COVID, we're all used to technical issues.
Yeah, that's true. So I just want to make sure there is no sound in the background. Okay, I think we're good to go. Okay, there's nothing formal, It's all informal, and our people get used to these things. It's hard to be the moderator, the speaker, and of course the technician. Okay, okay, Laura, can you give us a little introduction to our viewers here, who you are, and just a few things about yourself, This way we can, people get to know you. Please.
Absolutely. Well, thank you again so much for inviting me this evening. I'm really honored to be here as your guest and to participate with your community. My name is Laura. As you said, I live in Stratford, and I am a lecturer at Ryerson University. I earned my PhD from the University of Waterloo in religious studies almost 3 years ago now. And my area of specialization was religious diversity and particularly Muslim women's dress in Canada and debates over Muslim women's dress in public spaces. And this was after I got a master's in interfaith dialogue. I'm not Muslim. I'm Christian. I'm Mennonite. And of course, we have our own traditions around dress. And so I was always sort of interested in this. And currently, actually, I'm also a couple weeks away, inshallah, from getting my realtor's license. And so I'm also working on diversity and interfaith dialogue and very much in the real world sphere, as you know very much about.
Yeah. And you look fantastic with the hijab. You look amazing.
I love wearing the hijab. Thank you.
Yeah, you look good. You should take photograph before you take it. So tell your husband to take a nice picture of you, that's
He
nice.
did actually. Yes. Yeah. I'm always honored when I have an opportunity.
When he comes here, I'll give him this hat. So we'll take picture for both of you.
Oh, nice. There you go.
Okay. So it's amazing. A lot of people, we're celebrating and commemorating, whatever you want to call it, International Day for Women. You're a Christian Mennonite, and people, can you tell people about Mennonite? I visited Mennonite church. I know I have books about them, but regular Muslims don't know what Mennonite is. Can you tell them a little bit about the Mennonites?
Absolutely. Yeah. And, it's not just Muslims. Mennonites are a tiny little subgroup of Christians. So unless you live in Waterloo or Pennsylvania or certain areas, you may not know Mennonites. The way that we're sort of most famous is if you've ever been to St. Jacob's north of Waterloo and the horses and buggies and the bonnets, the Amish, if you've heard the Amish, that's a branch of Mennonites. So that is one small group of Mennonites. Most Mennonites are like me, that you can't tell us on the street apart from other people. But what makes Mennonites, for the most part, we share almost all the same beliefs as the majority of Christians. The differences are that we're pacifists, nonviolent. We don't believe in using violence against other humans in any circumstance ever, that all people are children of God, and that we don't have the right to judge, so we cannot enact violence on others. And the other thing is, if you're familiar with the Christian tradition of baptism, when, you've seen a movie where when they put water on the baby, we don't baptize babies or children. You have to be an adult to get baptized as a Mennonite, because you have to be an adult to choose to join the church, because we're very big on community and responsibility that comes with choosing to be a Mennonite. So those are sort of the main distinct differences.
That's what Jesus, peace be upon him, did with John. He was adult when he was baptized. Yeah. Amazing. Yeah. Any restrictions with diet?
Not with diet. No. Well, there's no restrictions. There are certain Mennonite cultural foods because of where Mennonites come from in Europe. So most Mennonites, they come from sort of one main group mostly, historically, but many lived in Russia for a long time. And so there's a lot of borscht and food like cabbage and pierogies and stuff like that, but it's not any restriction.
Oh, and also goulash? No, they don't have. They have.
Yes. Yeah, quilting and goulash and these sorts
very
of
nice,
things.
Rich food. We like that food.
Yeah, very rich food.
My wife cooks that. My kids love that kind of food. So yeah, it's nice. So you're a Christian. Mm-hmm. So what drew you to study Muslim women? To study in Muslim women for your PhD. You did your PhD at Waterloo University, correct?
That's at the University of Waterloo. That's right. Yeah. And well, for me, I think I was always interested in interfaith dialogue. Like I can remember being young, and I grew up in Northern Ontario, and there was very little religious diversity or racial diversity for that matter where I grew up. There was a very tiny Muslim community that moved into the town where my high school was, and there was a huge concern, I guess, around that when that happened. It was the first time the area had Muslim residents, and this was around 2001, 2002, and so people were very suspicious. And from the beginning, I thought, I think there's, more than what we're aware of. My parents aren't from there. My parents are from the States and from Cleveland, and so much more exposed to diversity of people. And so I was already sort of thinking, I think there's more here than what the common perception maybe was in the area. And then I went to university at Waterloo, and I was a history major, and I was studying history of dress and history of human rights. And I was married and I had a small child, and I was living in family housing on campus. And there were a lot of Saudi Muslim women there, some Iranian also, and I mean, really from everywhere in the world, but particularly Saudi. And right away, I made really good friends with a neighbor who to this day is one of my very best friends. And she's from Jeddah, Saudi Arabia. And we hit it off immediately and became very good friends. And I was curious because I studied dress and human rights and all of this. And one time I was in her house and I asked her about wearing the hijab. And as a Saudi woman, she was very covered. And she didn't always wear the niqab. But when she was covered, she was, other than that, completely covered. So I asked her about this. And she said to me, partly because it makes me feel closer to God, and partly because I want to be judged for my ideas and who I am and not what I look like. And I was so ignorant at the time. I was like 20 years old, and this was like my first friend who was Muslim, and I thought, what? That sounds like a feminist answer. I thought, how can these two things go together? And so it was that friendship in large part that led me to do my master's in interfaith dialogue, because I wanted to really understand what we believed more as Christians, because, when you grow up in a faith, you know it, but you only sort of know it because you're around it all the time. And you have to, when you're in dialogue with somebody else, you have to really be ready to answer questions, because Noha had so many questions for me I didn't know the answers to about Christianity. So I went into interfaith dialogue at that point, and just through her and through those experiences, I just met more and more Muslims, especially Saudis. And I just honestly loved everyone that I met. I loved the personalities. The women were friendly and feisty and smart and funny. And the men weren't at all like I'd been told to expect Arab men were like. They were gentle and kind and compassionate and considerate. And I genuinely just really enjoyed their company as people. And the more we talked, the more I got to understand how that was connected to religion and culture, and likewise for mine. And we used to say, like Noha and I in particular, used to say to each other that we really felt that we were closer and better friends because she was a very devout Muslim and because I was a very devout Christian.
Amazing, amazing. Look how much I like the piece where you said being a feminist is a feminist statement. Well, feminism is not bad. It's about, a lot of people have this wrong idea that feminists are all about women. It's actually because of the fact there is, as I mentioned in the introduction, women are a minority, women are oppressed, women, a lot of their rights were denied. Now with the civil liberties and all of these changes in the 20th century, and still we're fighting even for basic things such as, salaries, but women have been actually oppressed. So there is a movement counter. For every action, there is a reaction, especially wrong action. You will have, of course, the reaction from people. They have to speak up. And Islam, actually, our religion, and Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, and his wife, Aisha, spoke against any treatment or any, the right word would be any misogyny or any, look that is demeaning, degrading of women. Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, his wife Aisha, and all the companions, they were taught to speak up, against such views. And even one of the instances, Aisha, the wife of the Prophet, peace be upon him, and may Allah be pleased with her, she criticized one of the companions for, equating women to something negative. She said, how dare you do that? And I lived with the Prophet, and I see how he honored women. And of course, she spoke. And of course, some men, they feel intimidated if women speak. No, we want women to speak. So long as speak for the truth and speak, of course, for justice. And this is very important. We are with women and we will stand with women. So next thing, when you do this work, you're a Christian, and of course doing work where you're studying as a case study in your PhD, Muslim women. What aspect about the Muslim women? Is it the attire or the lifestyle or the rumors about Islam and Muslim women? What aspect specific? Was it specific or was it general?
No, it was specifically about dress. So my area of material culture, material religion, specifically through dress. And so when I teach at Ryerson, I teach at the School of Fashion, actually. And my interest is in religious dress in public spaces, especially as Muslim women. And actually, originally, I was going to do my dissertation solely on Muslim women's dress or comparing Muslim and Mennonite women's dress, because when Mennonite women wear bonnets in public, people respond to them very differently than when Muslim women wear hijabs in public. And I wanted to kind of shine a light on that and pull a thread at that about revealing what lays underneath that. But what I ended up doing was including other religious dress also, like the Sikh dastar, the turban, and also the niqab specifically, but also the hijab, to talk about the different ways that religious dress in public and women's bodies in public spaces get interpreted. And basically it was to use all these examples to point to how differently Muslim women are treated in public when they choose to wear a hijab, and especially if they choose to wear a niqab.
Wow, amazing. And what were your findings? So when you did this in your interviews, I saw some of your on your website and Facebook. I saw the pictures of Zonera. She is the wife of one day.
Yes, Zonera.
So what were your findings? Some of the things you came to publish. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. So not surprising, to be honest. And what I find it really important for is to bridge build and to help people understand where prejudices come from, why people who aren't Muslim, or especially people who aren't Muslim, who aren't familiar with Muslims, who don't have personal friends or family, why they held the stereotypes, the perceptions that they do. And so I use different case studies through history, because my training is as a historian and human rights case. It's a legal studies perspective. And so I use the case of Zonera Ishak and the Supreme Court decision to allow women to go for their citizenship ceremonies with a niqab as an example of the debates and what the common arguments are against the niqab and the hijab, and why those don't really hold water, and why those common arguments are really more founded on prejudice and misunderstanding than on the lived reality. So, I mean, for example, one of my colleagues in the program, she's Turkish and she's Muslim, but she doesn't wear hijab herself, and people don't assume she's Muslim. She has very fair skin. She wears her hair short and she doesn't wear a hijab. And she said she spends most of her time defending hijab and niqab because people are so misinformed about what it means. So that was my not surprising findings, was that people who are not familiar with Muslims can often have very misconstrued ideas of what the hijab means.
Amazing, amazing. Okay, so how do people respond to your work? Muslim or non-Muslim? So have the responses been positive, negative, surprising? How were the responses from both Muslims and non-Muslims?
It's funny. I always say, as an academic, you have to, especially in grad school, but you have to justify your work's relevance and why it matters. And that's, a core tenet of any scholarship application or anything. And I've never had to justify why it mattered. I've never met someone in Canada who doesn't already have an opinion about this. So the responses I get really vary depending where people are coming from. One of the frankly sad realities is that as a non-Muslim white woman, people will say things to me, like if I'm speaking to groups, I speak to older church groups, for example. That's been a really, I'd say, positive one, where because I'm also Christian, because I'm white, they will say things to me that I guarantee they would not say to a Muslim guest speaker at their church, because they're offensive, but they're what they think and they don't want to be rude. Canadian, they don't want to be rude, but they still hold these ideas. And so when they can say it to me, then I can sort of walk with them and say, okay, so why do you believe that? And then start challenging the assumptions and saying, well, have you thought about it this way? Or do you know in the Bible where it says this? Or, not fighting with them, but helping them see from our own tradition, if it's a church, for example, where that comes from. And so people have very strong opinions. I have found that Muslim women have been overwhelmingly positive. knock on wood, to this date, have never received a negative comment or response from a Muslim woman, whether she wears hijab or not. Any negative, to be honest, the only really harsh feedback I've ever gotten is from non-Muslim men.
So, like, for instance, I mean,
internet trolls, you know,
okay.
the men online.
Those are the, those who hide behind their words. Yeah.
Exactly. And to be honest, I think there have been times, especially when part of my program's requirements were to do public talks on your research. And there were times where I don't like conflict. And I would get worked up about these arguments I would have with people either in person or online. And in my experience, non-Muslims who are concerned about the hijab, women are usually curious, like they have their ideas. And then when I say things to them, they'll say, oh, I never thought about it that way. Whereas many men are the ones who want to argue and fight. And I've got a little bit of spit and fire in me. I'll stand my ground and argue because I'm dealing with actual facts. But whenever it stresses me out, I think about how I'm not Muslim. I can close my door or close the computer and walk away from it. But that my Muslim sisters who do wear hijab and do wear niqab can't walk away from it. Like they deal with this every day of their lives. And so the least I can do is do my part to stand my ground and hopefully shed a little more education on the truth.
On that point, so what do you think are most or some of the biggest misperceptions or misconceptions non-Muslims, and here you said Muslim men, they have about Muslim women?
There's the common ones. So I kind of go through my common points when I do public talks on this. So the most obvious one is that all Muslim women are oppressed. That's a given, right? I mean, everybody's heard the stereotypes and those tropes, right? That Muslim women are oppressed. And when you start...
some are, because they're human
Exactly.
beings. Yeah.
Exactly.
Because women, many women. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And this is my favorite question to ask people when they start talking about Islam XYZ is I always want to say, which Islam? Which one are you talking about? Because people tend to think in monolithic terms. And so it's like they think of one news story they heard about the Taliban and well, that must be the same thing as Indonesian or Bosnian or American or, there's a billion Muslims on the planet. There's obviously a lot of different experiences. And so I talk about, I'm talking about in Canada and these particular women in this particular circumstance. But the idea that Islam inherently oppresses women, that a Muslim woman must inherently be oppressed. And with that comes pity or fear. I find that either people who either feel sorry for Muslim women or they're afraid of them. Also that Muslim women, with that oppression, they're often surprised to learn that the Quran, for example, I'm not a Quranic scholar, just, by periphery of my studies, but, guarantees rights, and the Hadith guarantee rights of women in education, that women in Islam have the right to divorce, that women in Islam have the right to property, all these rights the Christian women are still fighting for in some traditions, And
what makes it's not the religion. Some cultures within Muslims are taking away those women's rights that the Quran, the God-given rights,
Yes.
they took them away, and then it makes Muslim look bad. Who is the first person, in history, a ruler, a legislator, who stood and said it is God-given right for every woman and man to choose whom they want to marry? The Holy Quran says you cannot force your daughters to marry so-and-so. They have to choose. But the culture took it away. No, we are the parents. We have the right over you. You should listen and obey. Of course, we obey our parents in this, but then it's good to obey your parents, but there are some personal rights that you cannot take away from that woman. If she can marry this person, you can't force her. But the cultures took away that's one of the rights, So they say, if you're really good daughter, you should listen to us. So the mother or the father would abuse their daughter's right, God-given right. The very first man, Laura, very first ruler who said that was Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. Nobody before him gave explicitly gave women the right to choose, and women they can keep their name. She doesn't belong to the man. So
yes.
So Mrs. Mary Smith, she marries John Johnson. she doesn't take the name Johnson unless she chooses so.
Yeah.
But she keeps her name. And inheritance and voting and leading. You know, yesterday, you know, the Rhodes Scholar, you know, the group. So I did a presentation yesterday. Amazing. I expected a question about women. Can women be imams? Now, even my community, they'll be like, what? Because you see, it's all semantics. You know, you guys as Christians or in English, you know, when you say I pray to God, it's different ways. If you read from the Bible, it could be prayer. If you do sing, if you sing in the church hymns, it's prayer. If you talk to God, it's prayer. If you listen to a preacher, it could be prayer. There are different forms of prayers. Similarly, before I eat, I pray. When I finish eating, I pray. When I go to sleep, I pray. When I go wash myself, I pray. When I read the Holy Quran, you could say all of this in English, prayer. So women can do all of that. Can a woman give a religious edict? Oh yeah. Can a woman teach religion? Oh yeah. 50% of our religious practices come from that woman I mentioned earlier, Aisha. You know, she gave us the details on how she used to take shower with her husband, the Prophet. Can you tell me a ruler in history? We know everything, even private matters, how he washed his body, you know, how he removed, purified his body in front of his wife. She told us everything we need to know as men and women. And she taught that the Prophet, peace be upon him, said, take a lot of your religion from this woman. And she was very intelligent, so brilliant, intelligent. She was a leader. She led an army. But so from day one, the very first copy, Laura, of the Holy Quran was with a woman. It was with the Prophet's wife.
Yes.
The very first Muslim, Laura, the very first Muslim that became Muslim, because Prophet was always Muslim. All the prophets, they're not anybody who believes in one God and doesn't associate with him, by definition is a Muslim. And the Prophet never worshipped stones and idols. The very first who declared the testimony of faith was Khadija. After her, we named this center, Khadija. And I can give you many first. The point is, a lot of people don't know that, but it is God-given right. Unfortunately, cultures took away those rights because a lot of societies are patriarchal, and there is this complex when someone is not as educated or smart, and if he feels, you're a woman and I'm listening to you, an intelligent person, I'm learning from you. I'm like, wow, this is good. When my wife speaks or somebody asks me some questions, say, my daughter is like that. She gives me some tough questions, like philosophical questions. And I don't want to insult her. I tell her, keep asking me those questions. Sometimes really I have to say, how can I put it to her? She's still a young girl. But she asked me about women in Islam. Why Islam allows men to do this, not women? Why this? I think women have to ask questions. And Aisha, and the wife of the Prophet used to argue with the Prophet. So the father-in-law, Omar, came and he asked his wife, said, did our daughter argue with her? She said, yes. She argued. Let's go and ask her. He said, I don't believe your mom what she said. You argued after he died, the Prophet. You used to argue with him. He's the Prophet. She said, yeah. I told him I don't agree with you more than once. And how did he react? She said, he was fine with it. He said, that's your opinion. That was the Prophet at home. But unfortunately, cultures said, no, women should just shut up and listen, and they're to serve. And they use one aspect of religion, obedience, like in Christianity, in the Bible, in Islam, there's that aspect you have to obey. And then they give it a different meaning, unfortunately. Very interesting. Today we'll talk about women. When I talk about a woman, in my mind comes my mother first. My daughter, my wife, my sister. These women, I respect them. These women mean a lot to me. I am nothing without them. So this is how men should think. Not like we men were fighting women. Think of your mother. We're nothing. We're absolutely nothing. Laura, in Islam we teach heaven lies beneath the feet of the mother.
I've heard that.
You're nothing without your mother. Doesn't matter. By the way, even if she's not Muslim, you still have to obey her. You don't obey her in one thing. If she tells you, bow down to this stone or worship other than God or this, but other than that, your mother, you don't use any words of, disrespect, even oof, like the Holy Quran. I don't know if you read that, and do not say to your parents. In Arabic, came like this, oof. So that's very important. Next question, so we can take questions from the people, I just have these. What do you feel your role in this debate, being non-Muslim? In my opinion, I can tell you, but I think you make the point even more valid, because you're going to be, if I speak, oh, he's Imam or he's professor of Islam or he is Muslim, obviously he would say that. But coming from you, I think it has more authority.
Well, thank you. I mean, that was a perfect question, because I was actually thinking as you were speaking too, that, I mean, one thing about my role is that my job is not to wade into internal Islamic debates. I mean, obviously, just like every single religion in the world, there are internal debates within Islam around what counts as hijab and what is the proper way to practice hijab and the verb and the noun and all of this. And I don't go near that. It's like I am an outsider. It is not for me to comment in any way, shape, or form on whether, for example, whether as a Muslim you are or are not required to wear hijab is not for me to say in any way. But what I do is study what women who choose to wear hijab do and what they experience in life. And, it's more the watching the events rather than saying what the events should be. And likewise, within Christianity, a lot of what I'm pointing out to people who are unfamiliar with the lived reality of Muslim women who choose to wear hijab or niqab is inconsistencies within our own traditions, whether our own traditions are Christianity or Canadian history, which, by the way, Muslims have been a part of Canadian history since the 1600s. And we forget that when we talk, Islam is a crucial component of the development of North America, but that's a whole other conversation. Yeah. But that aside, that when we look at inconsistencies, for example, in Islam, oh, well, this one Imam said this, or this one person said this, or I have an Iranian friend who told me this. We don't give, by we, I mean non-Muslims, we don't give the same respect that we would to our own tradition. So what I often say, for example, when people take an extreme example of something like Al-Qaeda and, oh, this is Islam. And I say, okay, well, you are whatever, Catholic, Presbyterian, something like that. Do you consider yourself a member of the Ku Klux Klan? Well, no, of course not. But that's a Christian organization. They call themselves Christians. Do you feel that that's representative of who you are? Or would you be offended if someone thought of that as you and your family? And do you feel the need to separate yourself from that? Like, why don't you go around telling everybody, just so you know, I'm not a member of the Klan? And if not, then why do you expect Muslims to do that sort of thing? And so through these conversations, I feel that my role, I mean, I don't want to get all esoteric or spiritual, but it feels like God has just sort of pushed my life in this direction, that my job, my calling, if we want to go that way, is to have conversations with people and to bridge build, to help people. I'm very passionate about interfaith dialogue, but people who engage in interfaith dialogue are already interested in hearing the other side. Like if you are going to an interfaith dialogue event, you may not agree, but you're at least interested to hear what they have to say. And as much as I love that, and I really, really do, that's cake for me. I feel like much more of my job is the everyday work in real estate, in everyday conversations in Tim Hortons. Well, not during the pandemic, it's not in Tim Hortons, but the conversations on the street.
Yeah, wonderful. Yeah. But there is also impetus that you want to build bridges and find common points, because this world, yes, if religions don't talk to each other, if people, especially leaders of faiths like or academics like ourselves, or people in the community who are very interested in religious matters, if they don't talk to each other, then we will fight each other. So it's very important that there is something trust in us to build bridges. If you're interested in interfaith dialogue, you're also interested in building bridges.
Yes.
A couple more questions, then we go to questions from our viewers. Can you
Absolutely.
speak to the Quebec Bill 21, the
Oh,
so-called
yes.
secularism bill? Of course, we know Quebec is like trying to be like France. Laïcité is secular. France banned hijab in public places, including schools, and this is not new. For the last couple of decades, this has been the issue that girls with hijab cannot attend schools, cannot attend, government buildings and institutions. So Quebec wanted to somehow follow the same way. So what have you done? You've done a lot of work around this. Can you tell us a little bit about it?
Yes, it's obviously on people's minds. I mean, less so during the pandemic, but certainly before. I was actually right before the pandemic in the Netherlands. I was asked to come speak on it. And I mean, I want to be clear to start with that I'm not in any way wanting to be anti-French or put them in an uncomfortable position, because the truth is that the rest of Canada likes to feel very self-righteous about Quebec's actions and feel like, oh, look at that xenophobic Quebec. But the truth is that Quebec is a tiny minority within Anglophone Canada, that the Anglophones beat the French. And so they feel very, very protective of their culture. And I'm not saying that they're doing it in good ways, but I mean, that's where it comes from. Whereas the rest of Canada is very confident in its culture because it's the big dog on the block. And I do not doubt at all that if it was the other way around, the shoe was on the other foot, English Canada would put the same kind of restrictions in place. They just don't feel threatened because they're so dominant. And so they can look down on the French for doing this. But these debates are a really, not to minimize the negative experience for women and men living under these rules, but they're really useful, clear examples of the holes in the logic. This idea that so-called secularism liberates women, in air quotes, and that religion, especially Islam, it's a subtext, especially Islam, inherently must oppress women. And so we're going to liberate you by telling you what you have to wear and putting you in a position where if you have to choose between your career and your religion, then you'll stay home and not have a career. And we're going to claim that we're doing this to liberate you, all while not listening to you. We're going to tell you what to think. We're going to tell you how to live. And that is the exact opposite of gender equity. It's the exact opposite of feminism, whether you belong to a religion or not. The whole point is women making choices for themselves, women having, the agency, and even people who don't like the hijab for whatever, if they have their own personal experiences that were very negative or different perspectives, that's fine. But it's when you're telling other women, I know better than you do. I know better than you do what liberation is for you. And so I will decide for you what you should and should not wear, how you should and should not speak. And the biggest problem I see with that, beyond just that's clearly not a good thing, is there's a saying in the Bible, don't focus on the speck in your neighbor's eye when you have a plank in your own. Quebec is in air quotes, post-religion because of its own history of oppression with the Catholic Church. And I'm not saying the Catholic Church is automatically oppressive. I'm talking about, as you're talking, culture, very specific things that were going on in Quebec politics and healthcare and all of that. So they see all religion through that lens. And they see any woman who's wearing religious dress through their own history, while the whole time not seeing that history never went away. I mean, the names of the streets are after Christian saints. The holidays are still Christian holidays. The whole structure is still a Christian structure. We call it the wake left behind the boat of Christianity. So you might not go to church and pray anymore. You may not say that you are a Christian, or you may not believe that, but your entire way of doing things is out of that Christian cookie cutter box. And so rather than actually putting all religions on an equal footing, which is what it claims to do, it actually gives privilege to the religions built like Christianity's cookie cutter and pushes to the side any religion that does things differently, and not just Islam, but certainly like Buddhism and a lot of other traditions that have very different traditions than Christianity. So there's this blind spot in their eye where they're saying, we're removing religion so that everybody's equal and we're liberating women, when what they're doing in practice demonstrably is the exact opposite. They're restricting women, they're pushing women to the side, they're forcing young women to leave the province so they can pursue their careers. And they're doing it in the name of secularism while actually giving precedence to cultural Christian practices, even if not theological Christian practices.
I'll give you an example. Maybe you can remember it. And Back in 2005, there was a movement by secular people here in Ontario. So, if you're familiar with the Jewish faith or Muslim faith, there is a law. So, yes, there unfortunately, some people think that's one of the problems, that there is a dichotomy, dichotomy of laws. So you have the Canadian law and the Islamic law. So a lot of our women are suffering when it comes to divorce, for instance, and marriage issues. One of them, and this is to speak about, I've spoken a lot about it, very frustrating, very, very frustrating situation. And again, I say to men, think of her like your sister or your mother or your daughter. So before you jump as a man, as a husband, basically, so a woman could divorce legally, but her husband could give her legal divorce, but he would keep her, according to the language of the Quran, hang, meaning that I don't divorce you religiously, so you can never be able to marry in the eyes of God, but legally you're divorced. So we try to reconcile. So would the legal divorce be religious or not? This issue is not only for Muslims, for other faith groups. So the point here, so we used to be able to do some kind of ADR, mediation and so on, and dispute resolution. But then in 2005, they stopped us from doing it as faith leaders. So there was a report by Marian Boyd and Professor Julie McFarlane from Windsor, which is, has a very good, solid law school there. And they did study, they said, no, Muslim women, you're trying to help them and say no religion get involved, but then the people who are helping them through this ADR and this, now you're disempowering them. So after 2005, when a woman comes to me and says, sorry, I can't help you, because my words mean nothing, I can do nothing. So as of 2005, thanks to so-called liberating movement, many women, they got their legal divorce, but the husband doesn't want to pronounce the religious divorce. You see how challenging it is? Very point you mentioned is sometimes we think, so, and the Marian Boyd and many of the scholars, they said, you know what? Do not go the other extreme, because you're going to make, so a lot of women now, they have a problem. A lot of women, poor women, the man says, no way, I'm going to punish her. Of course, he can do that Islamically. However, we as imams, as religious leaders, as community leaders, we've made it clear that there is a process, so long as there is no duress, nothing, that there should be one divorce. You can have one law here. We have to find a way for the two laws to work. That's one example. You're right. And similarly, you may think, we will stop women from wearing hijab in the name of making everybody equal. But then Muslim girls and studies, I'm sure you came across this study in the US and other places in Europe, that some of the girls who grew up in Islamic environment wearing hijab, after a woman cannot wear hijab, doesn't have to wear hijab until she reaches the age of puberty, as you well know. And then the girls who were not used to they had to go to school, so they had to take off the scarf. And then I used that kind of clothing. And you understand, if you're someone coming from Amish community or Mennonite would understand better than the mainstream, society. And then the girls couldn't go to school because you know how girls compete, the hair and the looks and the fashion and this, they felt out of place. Whereas when they were wearing what they were distinguished as a religious group, they were fine, that this is us, identity. So you're right, your point is very deep actually. Last question to wrap up. So what do you think the future of Muslim women? Some questions are coming up soon, asking you actually about some around this, but in your experience, what do you think with the Muslim women, the future? Some of them feel bad because, every time, now it's the COVID, but it's very difficult for Muslim women, especially after the shooting in Quebec or any event that happens against the Jewish community, Muslim community, or other minorities. Some women stop. When 9/11 happened, I talked to some of my students from New York, and they said, you know what? We couldn't go out to the street for a couple of months because we were walking and some spot on us and go back where you came from and all of this. They hear dealing with this and being a young woman, it's not an easy thing. So maybe you could comment on that very specific point so we can move to the questions of our
Well,
viewers?
I think that's an incredibly important question, and I think it also ties to your last point with, for example, the courts, for example, because true multiculturalism, which is what Canada aspires to, true diversity is where everybody can enter the public sphere with their identities intact. That's the goal. Not that everybody has to be some sort of whitewash neutral where we all wear the same uniform and there's no culture involved, there's no spice involved. So what we should be aspiring toward, what we say we're aspiring toward when we say we're a multicultural country and the diversity is our strength. It's great that we say that. I think that's the first important step, that we say that, but that to actually live that means that everybody gets to keep their identity intact, whatever that looks like. And that's what we can come safely into the public space together with. So Muslim women, I think that Muslim women have a very bright future in Canada. I think that the Muslim population in Canada is very disproportionate in many ways. You're disproportionately highly educated. You're disproportionately successful in business. You're disproportionately engaged in community service. I mean, you're just an all-around great group of people. But I mean, you have all of these even though the Muslim population in Canada is actually a very small percentage, it's much smaller than people tend to think it is, the impact is disproportionate. And because there's so much emphasis culturally and religiously on education and girls' education, and my students, I have a lot of Muslim students, some are hijabi, some are not, teaching in fashion. Some of them are fashion designers. They're doing modest fashion wear, really exciting, interesting things, political science, law, all of it. And I think that Canada is, I think it's slow, and I think it's 2 steps forward, 1 step back, as we see with debates and as politics sort of do this back and forth. But overall, I think that Canada is, and I want to be clear that when I say Canada, I don't separate that from Muslims. It's not that there are Canadians and there are Muslims. Muslims are Canadians. Like sometimes I think that mentally even, allies and progressives tend to separate. Muslims are Canadian, Canadians are Muslim, and that Canada as the collective is moving forward in a way to understand and appreciate Muslim women, whether they wear hijab or not. I mean, the vast majority in Canada don't, 84%, but that whether they present visibly Muslim or not in public spaces, I think that the future is bright but I also think it's challenging. I'm not saying it's easy, and there's obviously, the stories you're talking about with 9/11, and I heard so many stories doing my research. I would just have to walk away from my computer. I'd be so angry and so upset because of what people were experiencing, friends and strangers were experiencing, of what people would say to them in public, what people would do to them in public. It's completely horrific and unacceptable. But I think that Muslim women are, in general, very strong. And I think that they are highly educated and very driven and got a lot of chutzpah. Like Muslim women that I know have a lot of spunk, a lot of chutzpah and strong spines, and are just sort of, eyes forward and are doing incredible things. And the more Muslim women we have who are teachers and lawyers and doctors and politicians, the more comfortable non-Muslims become with, oh, okay, wait, so that image I have from that news story that I saw 10 years ago isn't the whole story. There's more to it than that. So I think the future is bright for Muslim women, inshallah.
Inshallah. Oh, thank you. God willing. God bless you. Okay, I have some questions, and beautiful, as you were talking actually about Quebec, I know this family, and Nadia, she's a teacher actually from Montreal. So she's with us live here, and she's asking you this question. And I asked her to explain why did she resign. So basically she said, let me just tell you exactly what she said. She said, I resigned. Let me read exactly her words. Mm-hmm. So she said, I live in Montreal and I resigned from my position as a teacher. So I resigned as a teacher from my job because I felt that the inequality that existed because of Bill 21 was not fair. I was protected by the grandfather clause within Bill 21 because I was permanent. You wanna ask her? You wanna comment on her comment? She didn't really ask question, but she's listening to you. So she said she resigned, but she was only protected because there was a grandfather clause.
You said her name's Nadia?
Yeah.
Sorry. Yes, Salam Nadia. My grandmother's name is Nadia. I love the name Nadia. Thank you for your comment. And I have to say, I mean, obviously, that's not the first time I've heard that, but I think it's heartbreaking. I think it's heartbreaking as an educator myself, but also just for, if our goal is, I mean, with International Women's Day and Quebec wants gender equity for women in the workforce, we are pushing women out of the workforce. And that's horrible and absolutely unnecessary because it has nothing to do with her capacity as a teacher and quite the opposite actually. And so my heart breaks for her that was her experience. One of my students, she's a master's student, she's done now. She's from Quebec, she's Muslim. Her parents are Palestinian and she was born in Quebec. And her mother has actually a fashion boutique in Montreal, makes like head wraps, not just the hijab, but just like hats as well. And she had a lot of teachers coming in saying, I need a head covering that doesn't look like a hijab to kind of like fly under the radar, but to keep their jobs. But what this family also told me is that a lot of people my students' age were leaving the province, like those who want to be teachers or lawyers or doctors were coming to Ontario or BC for education, whereas the ones who were older and probably Nadia's age if she was being grandparented in, their lives were there, their families were there. And so they were going to stay, whether it meant, and they were given an impossible choice. Were they going to, and these are, like I just mentioned, that Muslim women are disproportionately highly educated in Canada of holding advanced degrees. And so as a woman who holds a PhD, I always say I didn't find it in a cereal box. I worked really hard to get my degrees. And for women to have worked so hard as Nadia must have to get to that position and then to be forced to choose is unfair, doesn't even begin to cover what that is. It's just completely unjust.
Words coming from you again, really comforting. You're a Christian, but from a minority Christian group. So you understand very well what Muslim women are going through. She said, I resigned because of the inequality towards other Muslim women in the workplace, on the workspace, and the inequality was intolerable. We'll move to another question, Laura. What advice do you have for Muslim women who feel they are treated differently at school or work due to their appearance? It may affect their self-confidence and opportunities for advancement. This is actually, I think it's, the person asking the question is a male, Adnan, but probably the family is watching as well.
That I have to say, I'm very honored that you would ask me that question. I mean, it's not something that I'm forced to live with in my life. As I mentioned earlier, that I am very aware of the position of privilege that I have. And so I'm honored to be asked that. And the answer is it depends on your comfort level and it depends on your position. So, I mean, if you are a new Canadian who's, trying to get by and pay bills, then you maybe don't want to rock the boat. If you're a lawyer, and you're a partner in a firm, then you hold a different sort of power. But you are treated differently in Canada. I mean, that's not just my opinion. I have the data to back that up. Muslim women who wear hijab are treated different in Canada. And I've experienced it. I have gone out in public as part of, sociology experiments in hijab to see how I was treated differently. And frankly, it was shocking how differently I was treated. And so a woman or a girl in that position, if they're not, it depends where you are also in the country. Like if you live in a very remote northern region, like where I grew up, it's going to be harder for you than if you go to a school in Toronto, downtown Toronto, where people may not even blink in the fact that you're wearing a hijab. So it very much depends on your context. And also because the fact is the law in Canada does protect you. We have a lot of rigid human rights laws in Canada. And it's my kind of key of my whole dissertation was that when Muslim women have fought for these rights, like this case of Zunaira Ishak, that's not just about Muslim women, because the way Canadian law works is that they just advanced human rights for all Canadians, full stop. So the laws exist to protect you when you're being treated differently, when you're being discriminated against. But the question is, I'm not going to sit here and say, therefore, you must go and do that. That was what Zunaira decided to do. It was a long process for her to decide that, as it is for most people who choose to challenge it legally, or through HR, or through your boss or your teacher. Again, it depends where it's coming from. Is it a classmate? Is it a teacher? But just know that the law is on your side if you choose to challenge it But if you don't, that's also very understandable. And just make sure that you have really strong supports around you who will help you get through it.
I have a nice question. This is one of our, these people, I know them, they're in Aurora. What's wonderful. So she says, her name is Leila. She said, I've been married to my husband, my loving husband. What a wonderful wife. God bless you. I've been happily married to my loving husband for 20 years. I am not a Muslim. I love Islam. I learned Islam, but I'm still waiting for that moment. You know, my husband never forced me. It's a long, but she said, my husband never forced me to become Muslim, but I have great respect for Muslims. I understand what you're talking about. And unfortunately, there are a lot of people who are misrepresenting Islam. She's saying that she likes to watch us because she thinks, thank you, Laila, that we're like moderate. I would say, Laila, all Muslims, Islam is about moderation. There's no moderate Islam, or, you know, there are some expressions that are very harsh to women, but I can assure you, Laila, that it's unfortunately the interpretation of man, it's not God. But going back, she has a question for you, and really touching. She said, I try to sympathize with hijab, but I found a lot of women who are wearing hijab, they like to keep the distance, even with us women. So she somehow, I know it's not a question for you, but she's making a comment, which is true. Would you agree with her that women with hijab, just this ties in with the question that just came, that you just answered. Would you encourage Muslim women, especially the visible, you know, as you said, some women are Muslim, they don't put the head cover, but they can be identified as Muslims with their decorum, with the way they dress up, they're fully covered, but they may not cover the head. But would you say that some women who wear hijab, I don't want to put a burden on their shoulders, but they do have some kind of responsibility representing Islam? Let me go to the Mennonite community or Amish. If a girl is wearing Amish, I know it's a kind of a burden, and I heard from our daughters and our different people, well, we're doing this, but don't put more burden for us. We can be the ambassadors of Islam. We're human beings. However, would you agree that if women who are wearing hijab, and I'll give you a story about that if we have time, they have some kind of, I wouldn't say responsibility, but it would be nice for them to open up a little bit more with the women who don't wear, with the non-Muslims. You know, if you didn't meet women with hijab who were kind and nice to you and made you feel welcome, like the Saudi lady that you said, probably you would have had a different experience, and probably you said, you know what, these people are rude. Well, I mean, talk openly. Is there some kind of responsibility? Would you encourage women with hijab to be more open, to reach their human sisters, not to make her hijab identify, okay, and then shut down the world? I think women with hijab, we are somehow contributing to misunderstanding when we build barriers. You know?
I think I have two different parts to that, because one is, her name was Layla, right?
Layla, yeah.
Layla's experience. So I've known a lot of people who have married Muslim men. And I had one classmate, for example, that she was white. She grew up in a Christian home. She married a Muslim man, and she did convert to Islam, but she was also a religion scholar like me. And after a thorough study, she really concluded that as a devout Muslim, she didn't feel that hijab, the noun, the scarf, was necessary, and that she practiced hijab in verb form in other ways. And she felt like her family on her husband's side, while they were very loving towards her, didn't view her as the real Muslim because they wore hijab and she didn't, despite the fact that, of course, many Muslim women have that same interpretation. So they felt like she never really fully converted. Conversely, my husband's cousin married a Turkish man, and she did convert and converted also in wearing hijab, and feels very, very included in her family, you know, great relationships on both sides. So on the one hand, in terms of internally in the community, I mean, again, I am an outsider to the community, so I am not giving directives or orders in any way. But I do believe that all communities, especially ones that profess faith in God, should be welcoming spaces. And that I think that it's important that Muslim women support each other, just like I think it's important that all women support each other, and that there there's enough opposition and challenges for women in the world without us making it harder for each other. On the other hand, one of the cornerstones of my work is also that women, both Mennonite women who wear the bonnet, in fact, I even have a Mennonite bonnet right here.
Yeah.
Um,
You can show us actually later. Yeah, I was going to ask
sure. One of my case studies in my dissertation was also about a time when a branch of Mennonite women stopped wearing the bonnet. And it was because part of it was they were fed up with being the billboard for Mennonites. And it was at the time of a world war, and they wanted to conscript the Mennonite men, and they were using it as, we need you to wear the bonnet so that our men aren't sent overseas. And they're like, no, it's not a religious requirement. We don't think that's fair anymore. And in the same way, I think that Muslim women are given a really unfair burden by society, both internally and externally, to be the embodiment of Islam. And that if you wear a hijab, all the projections come on you, like the being spat at, the having your hijab ripped off, being called horrible names, all the things that we all know the stories of. You already have a target on your back in our society if you choose, especially if you choose a niqab, but definitely even if you choose a hijab. And I think that it's unfair to expect women to then be the beacon also. So, I mean, on the one hand, I think that yes, just as a human being, we should all support each other and be welcoming, especially to converts or family members, who are adjacent to our communities. But at a more macro societal level, I don't think that we should expect women to be the living embodiment because of the clothes they wear.
You're right. And actually, by the same token, and you said it earlier, we have a saying in French, c'est pas l'habit qui fait le moine. It's not the habit that makes the monk. However, you can still be Muslim. We encourage hijab for the people who believe in it and practice in it, and it is in the Quran. There's something, it is in the Holy Quran, but some people interpret their way. But hijab is in the tradition, and it'll be very hard to really remove it from Islam. However, if you don't wear hijab, this does not take you out of Islam. You're still Muslim. And if you wear hijab, it doesn't mean that you're the best Muslim. It is quite a burden. The burden, it shouldn't be seen as a burden. Hijab is one aspect of Islam. If you feel, in your heart, you should do it, don't hesitate, put it on. If you're hesitant, don't stop. Because some people say, I'm going to wear hijab and then pray and fast and this. It's like they put the whole package. There are things can be gradual, So if you don't pray, first pray. Prayer is more important than hijab. And then comes eat halal, stay away from haram. And then, as you said, as I say, hijab is at 3 levels. There is the verbal, okay? There is the visual, okay? And then there is the behavioral. You may probably wear, but your behavior is totally the opposite of hijab. So, and some people from other faiths, they have manners, values, and they may not be Muslim. So where do they, that's also an aspect of hijab. Hijab is to preserve me from going to a wrong way, again, there are people who don't believe hijab is required, but it is in the Quran. And in the Sunnah of the Prophet, peace be upon him. Last question maybe, and we have questions that are trickling like crazy. I'm just trying to combine some of them. Laura, there is one here from another woman, Vanessa Khan. In your experience with religious studies and experience with different people, how do you believe we can change the negative perception about Islam and religion? Or she says, and the wrong perception of women being oppressed. Maybe briefly, I think you did answer it not too long ago, so we can get to a couple more questions.
Well, and the answer is very simple: education. And it's knowing people. In my experience, when people, even people who I've known who hold very prejudiced opinions of Muslims, when they meet my friends, it's like, oh, it's a little different to know people than to have ideas. And so I think it's about education, and I think it's about actually having real life relationships.
That's it. It couldn't be a better answer, And another one, BB. BB says, and she has a comment. There was a question. She said, "You look so beautiful in the hijab." And the professor is very good and very beautiful, and she looks so comfortable in the hijab. Alhamdulillah. So they like you. Actually, hijab.
Oh, that's very kind. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, everybody, good comments. Doctor, do you think things will change in future for Muslim women in hijab? I think you already answered that question.
Yes,
I'm
I
gonna
do.
go.
Yeah.
I'm gonna look. We have other, a lot of people wishing happy International Women's Day, and they're commenting on you. They want you to be more in this halaqah. Come another time, inshallah.
Oh, that's so kind of you.
You have to be a regular speaker. And I think the other questions, let me check on Facebook again. We have 3 or 2. Okay. Yeah, I think pretty much the same questions. I think almost 9:30. Yeah, I want to just give you a chance to show us the hijab of the Mennonites, you know?
I'll do that. And I just want to say something to what someone just said in your comment also, that for the future, I think the future is bright because I think that things are shifting. And even, I mean, my daughters have grown up around Muslims. I mean, starting with that community, but ever since. And I was downstairs getting ready for tonight. And, you know, we're in a virtual space, but it's still, in my opinion, a sacred masjid space. And so I wear hijab out of respect. And my daughter, who's 15, saw me and she said, "Oh, Mom, that brings back warm memories," and gave me this warm hug because she used to see me in hijab a fair bit going to masjid or just with my dear Muslim friends and good neighbors of ours now just in our life. And so these are white Christian English Canadian children who have grown up and they find it, when they got old enough to understand Islamophobia exists, they were genuinely shocked and surprised. How can anyone ever be afraid of a woman in a hijab? Because that's what they've grown up with. So I think that's the future. Inshallah.
Yeah, you're right.
I hope.
I have more hopes as well. The young generation is less judgmental, more inclusive. They're nice. They may be a better generation than ours. Show us a little bit the Mennonite.
Okay. So just like in Islam, there are many different styles. This is just one, and it's the black style. In Mennonite traditions, a woman's head covering is called a bonnet or a veil. It's called veiling, the practice. And even this would be called a veil. And as you may have seen, some women always wear their hair pulled back and often in a bun or a low bun. And sometimes it's just a little piece of fabric that covers the bun, all the way to, this is one of the more conservative bonnets. And I mean, I've never put it on with a hijab, so I don't know, it's not going to work. but you can see it covers.
You know, everybody knows it. Your name is Laura. Remember Little House in the Prairie?
Yeah. Yes, exactly. Like Laura Ingalls Wilder. Yes.
We used to watch it every week, you know, Michael London, and we were children. And of course, for us, because we're French speakers, so it's translated into French. And the French do a very good job with the translation. And you know what, Laura, so funny. And you're Laura today. So, and there is another one, correct?
And you're not wrong, because just like the hijab comes from ancient Middle Eastern styles, the Mennonite bonnet comes from 19th century European style. It's when they decided to start wearing, because Western Europeans wore head coverings even legally for most of our history. And then in the 19th century, that habit started to shift. And a large group of Mennonites felt that it was important because in the Bible, it says a woman's head must always be covered. And one thing I want to point out is that one of the reasons people misunderstand Muslim hijabs in Canada is because they interpret it through Christian tradition. So this does mean something different than a hijab does in many ways, including that a Mennonite woman who wears a bonnet always wears it. She doesn't take it off when she's home. She's wearing it until she goes to bed at night. And it does mean
bonnet,
male.
That bonnet, they wear it.
Yeah, this is actually more of an outdoors one. They're inside ones, but even like around her family, until she goes to bed at night, she wears it, and when she wakes up in the morning, she puts it back on, because the Bible says cover your head when you're praying, and in another place it says you should always be praying. So you wear it. But the other thing is that it does represent male headship in the household, which the hijab does not. And so it's saying that I wear this as a sign that my husband is above me and that I am subservient to him, which is why a lot of Mennonites don't like it anymore. So that's a different understanding of a woman covering her head for religious reasons than what the hijab means. And so people misunderstand the hijab, thinking that it must mean that she's subservient to her husband.
Okay. So that's very good that people understand. That's the perception of hijab. Okay. Submission, surrender. You have another model. Usually there's a white one, no?
Yes, there is, but I didn't dig it out because it's buried in a trunk far away. But they're just little pieces of fabric, and they just like look little handkerchiefs. Another style is like a kerchief, like the Amish women you see, more like the triangle, and it's not as big as a hijab, but it's tied around. But just like with the hijab, there's not. There's Muslim fashion, like Islamic Fashion Week in Dubai. Like there's high Muslim fashion, which I love. There's no Mennonite equivalent of that because the idea is not just simplicity of coverings and modesty of like not showing body parts. It's also supposed to be modesty of like humility of fabrics and simplicity. And they don't wear makeup. They don't wear jewelry at all, like no wedding rings. And so you're supposed to be very plain. And it's called plain dress. You're supposed to be very plain, very simple so that your focus remains on service to God.
Amazing. Amazing. Your final words, Laura, as we wrap up.
I want to say thank you so much for the opportunity to be here with you all. I'm really honored to be here, and happy International Women's Day to everybody. Islam has a lot to teach the world about women's rights and women's inclusivity. And if we can all just start listening to each other, we'll all be a lot better off, I think.
Wow, thank you. As you were talking, I was trying to find a video from late 18th century of women in UK. You could just check it on the website. I have it somewhere in the phone, and I was going to airdrop it to the computer. Basically, this camera, how they used to put cameras and people walking around and kids looking.
Mm-hmm.
So it's amazing. I can send it to you. And all the women actually in UK, in England, were wearing hijab, exactly the one you're wearing now.
Until the 1920s. Western women were fully covered until the 1920s. Yeah, that's right.
And of course, as you said, you quoted the Bible. The Bible actually, the Old Testament, tells women to cover, but because Muslims want to stick to this, it's about decency, it's about modesty, it's about being treated the same, and there are a lot of stories we don't have time to share. But thank you very much, Laura. Thank you for being with us tonight. I will definitely invite you to talk about other topics. You being a professor, community activist, and also I would say human rights and religious rights activists. We need people like yourself. We need people that can speak in the language they understand. Many Muslims are immigrant, half of the population is immigrant, but our children, if they take leadership, they would do better job than us. They would speak the same language as you do. They would actually express themselves because they went to public school, high school, university here. They're thinking Canadian, they breathe in Canadian, everything is about. Our kids love, hockey and basketball. They don't have no attachment except spiritually to Mecca and Medina, but they don't. Many people, I say to the kids, are you Pakistani? And say, no, my parents are. Are you Guyanese? No, my parents are. I am Canadian. And they say it in a very assertive manner. I'm a dual citizen, I love where I come from. Morocco is this is my origin. I'm not going to deny my parents are there. I chose kind of Canadian by choice, you're born here. You grew up here. Probably your parents were born here. You don't know any other country. You don't know Germany or Ukraine where people came from, or, so that I think our children will be able to express themselves better, but they need to educate themselves. And last, I know you spoke enough, but I want just for young ladies, I have a lot of young girls in my classes. They're like from 14 to 18. Some of them go to university. I think my daughter also is watching. I told her to watch tonight. What would you say to these young, on this International Day of Women, young Muslim women? What would you tell them? I know you spoke about being proud, but something of empowerment as you were born here, so you're a Canadian, you're not an immigrant. Okay, nothing wrong being immigrants, but what would you say? Because we're telling our daughters it's good to do this, good to do that, and then they're really battling between where their parents come from and the values and their reality. What would you say? You are a good testament of that balance between your values of religion and your reality.
I think that's such an important question, and I'm honored that you would ask me that question for the young women watching. I think, first of all, number one, believe in yourself, which is, I know, a very Canadian thing to say, but believe in yourself, because you're not alone. There's just so much research to back up how first generation children really have to live between two worlds, and that's really challenging. But that there's also, with that challenge, great empowerment and great power that you will have from navigating two different spheres. And in fact, one of the things that my research showed right from the beginning, and I'm not the first one to discover this, is that it's actually the children of immigrants who are the most activists. They're the ones who are, in fact, a lot of them are adopting hijab, even when their mothers and their aunts don't wear hijab. They're adopting it as an alignment with Muslim community and Muslim identity, because when there's so much backlash in our world, they want to stand firm and say, not only am I Muslim, I'm proud to be Muslim, I want to be seen as Muslim. And I think that there are many challenges that you face. I've had a lot of students who are in that position, and I know that there's a lot that you're carrying on your shoulders from a lot of different directions. It is hard. It's not in your imagination, but that what I've seen my students do, what I've seen my friends do in those positions, and what I've seen from people that I studied with for my dissertation work and since then, is the incredible things they accomplish and the incredible good they do in the world. I mean, I'll just make this point before I wrap up here, that in the Quebec example, I was talking about my former student. She's a master's student. She finished her master's. I mean, she was a master's student. Let's start there. Her father, a Palestinian immigrant, is a taxi driver, and her best friend's father, also a taxi driver. And there was a problem with the taxi unions in Quebec. And so she was either at the end of high school or the beginning of undergrad, I don't remember, but about 18 years old, around about in there. And she and her friends were the ones who rallied because they spoke French and they had Canadian pride to stand and say, no, you can't treat the immigrant taxi drivers this way. It's not fair. And they got it actually turned around. And so it is young Muslim women on the streets with the signs and with the protests who are incredibly empowered and are forcing everyone else, whether it's their parents or whether it's their teachers, to look at them as whole people and to see what they are truly genuinely capable of, because it's a great amount. There's a lot of strength there.
Alhamdulillah, with this, Alhamdulillah means thanks God, with these beautiful words of hope and encouragement for our young ladies and young girls, because believe me, I've said it many times in this organization, Faith of Life Network. I said to our congregation, I said, we need to invest more in girls between 12 and 18. They are the future mothers and leaders, and we need to invest. That's why we have youth leadership program. If you're young from 12 to, I think, 17, and then there's another program for 17 to 24. Join us on Sunday for the youth leadership program. Everything is on the website, and you can join a program. Wonderful. We have youth mentors, leaders. It's about we had actually Big Sister program. We discontinued it because of COVID, but the youth leadership program is for boys and girls. Join us on Sunday, every Sunday, 11 to 1 p.m. You need to register. It's free, but you need to register. Thank you, Dr. Laura. It was a pleasure having you. God bless you. Bless your husband and your family, your children. Bless your business. And always give you good health and keep you strong. And we hope and pray we will have you over here. Hopefully, if we have Ramadan, I would like to host you and your beautiful family for iftar, inshallah, which is in less than 2 months. Definitely, you're going to come visit us, inshallah, whether at home or here, inshallah. So looking forward. I'm going to make you fast maybe for a couple of hours, you know.
I could do a whole day. I could try.
Okay, we'll do a whole day. Okay, so thank you very much. God bless you. Thank you. And see you again very soon. Everyone, take care. Sorry, we couldn't accommodate some questions, too many of them. That shows the interest. It's been a nice an hour and a half, almost an hour and a half, and it was a wonderful, special night. Next week is Q&A, questions and answers. It's anything related to religion, but next week specifically, we're going to talk about the night trip and the ascension to heaven, because it is Rajab, the month of Rajab. We commemorate that very, very special moment or special part of history of Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. So join us on next Friday to talk about Isra and Mi'raj. We will have also hopefully some entertainment as well on the program. Thank you. May Allah bless you. Peace be with you. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.